All right, recording on this computer.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of, and we got a title now, the Just My Luck Podcast, man. Just My Luck Podcast. We'll talk a little bit about where that concept came from before we get into the topic. But, man, I'm your co-host, Justin, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Myron. Say what's up, Myron.
What's up, everybody? Myron, back again. Just My Luck Podcast. We making another step towards the right direction. First, it was just Myron and Justin podcast.
Yep, the untitled.
Podcast. But it's just constantly evolving, constantly making steps, making strides. We having ideas, think about topics, just making it happen. That's how we do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, man, welcome to another episode. And so let's get into it, man. So Just My Luck. Of course, it was untitled last week. We didn't get into it, but first of all, it's a fire name because if I have to say so myself, because let me tell y'all something. If you look at the first three or four letters of my name, it's J-U-S-T, and then first two letters of his name are M-Y, right? So put those together, Just My Luck. Perfect. So a few years ago, Myron and I were talking, and we're both musically inclined. We're both, band. Myron's a singer. I mean, we're both very versatile musicians. I'll say it that way, in various ways. And we were talking about doing a mixtape. One of the things I like to do is I like to mix, edit music, record music. So I rap. I do a little singing if needed. And I really, me and Myra were talking, and we wanted to do a mixtape together. And we were trying to think of a name. We did a couple of songs for it. We were trying to look for one earlier, couldn't find it anymore. But we were thinking of names, and we came up with Just My Luck. Except back then it was for a mixtape. But man, we didn't know that all these years later, that was the name for the podcast that we're doing now. We never put it together like that until like yesterday or something like that. We were just talking like, oh yeah, Just My Luck Podcast. And then we were like, that's it. That is it. And that's why we thought of that name even back then, right? I mean, it's great if the mixtape happens, but this is a forum for us all to have these conversations about, or as men, about these various topics. So again, we want to welcome you to the episode 2 of the Just My Luck podcast. So we wanted to get into a little bit today about, man, fatherhood and parenting. And this topic is man, it's a lot that we could go into, man. So Myron, so talk to us, man. So my question is, to get us started, what was it like? Because I have 2 children. Myron has 2 children, right? So we both have the same number of children. So I'm going to ask you, Myron, from, 2. Now, Myron's a girl dad. He has 2 girls. I have a girl and a boy, right? So we have that difference in perspective. But we both share the experience of becoming a father for the first time, right, with our first child. Myron, what was that experience like? And also, the part kind of B to that question, part B, what were some of your biggest things you learned in that process of being a new father?
Well, I would probably say I'd have to start off kind of giving like background prior to the first thing happening, prior to the first child. So at the time, I was thinking about this as I was preparing to like come up for the podcast and stuff like that. And I was thinking, because my grandmother is at the house now, and we were talking. I was like, we were going through the contracts and stuff like that, earlier today. And it's kind of crazy that we're coming back to this topic. But I mean, long story short, me and my wife were separated at the time. And I was staying with Justin and his family at the time. And me and my wife were kind of in a state of reconciling and everything like that. And yeah, man, I mean, in terms of having the first child, I mean, there's a lot of different emotions. Because it was happiness initially in terms of me and my wife reconciling, we having a child. But then things begin to change in terms of different perspectives on continuing to, pursue this thing together. And, I think just a lot of things that I at least for right now, I don't want to, really dive into. But just if I'm speeding along to that point, I mean,
Take your time. I mean, we're not in a rush. Take your
yeah,
time in explaining what you want to explain.
yeah, I think from my perspective, it was challenging because I wasn't even in the same place as my daughter and my wife were when she was born.
Yeah,
And,
you mean physical location, right?
yeah.
Like in the same place,
Mhm.
physically. Okay, got it.
So not even physically in the same place, and then um, you know, just the challenges of trying to figure out what is my relationship going to look like with my wife in terms of things. I was trying to process how I deal with that emotionally, and then at the same time, I'm trying to process, you know, being a new father at the same time and figuring out like what is this going to be, how is this going to look in terms of me raising this child in a different place, than this, this is not what I anticipated my first experience with my child being like, you know what I'm saying?
Right, right,
So it's like, how do you, it's just so, for me, I was processing a lot of different things at the time,
right. A lot
so,
of different things. Yeah.
so, my experience, it was great, seeing her for the first time, but, I didn't get to see, I didn't get to be with Shanice throughout the the first part of the labor. I didn't get to take her to the hospital. My wife
And
drove herself. She's drove herself to the hospital.
yeah,
She
and
really,
right. I'm gonna let you keep going, but just
Mhm,
for the listeners,
mhm,
Shanice, you mentioned a name.
mhm,
That's your wife.
mhm.
Yeah. Just for
Yeah.
the listeners,
Oh, okay.
because we know who she is, but
Right,
they
right, right,
don't know.
right. So we yeah, we're there, and I mean, she drove herself to the hospital, which is just, it blows my mind because like, I how can you like drive yourself to the hospital in that type of state? Like, it just the fortitude of a woman to do that is just beyond me. Like, I still am amazed in terms of that process. But she drove herself to the hospital. Um and my mom, them, I think she had talked to me and said like, hey babe, Shanice is, about to have a baby and stuff like this. So I'm in, mind you, like Shanice at this time is in Nashville. So I'm like 3 hours away. In Chattanooga, like 3 hours away from Nashville or something like that.
It's like 2.5,
Yeah, two and
three.
a half, almost 3 hours. So that we're talking about like, I'm working,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm still trying to prepare and, with our job, well, at the time I was working for the state, with you and everything like that for the state of Tennessee. So I'm like, I gotta pick up and drive, and you know, I was trying to figure out, do I take vacation time? When do I take it and everything like that? Because the baby came early too. So
Mm-hmm.
so just so many different things were going on at the time. But I mean, I guess just to sum it all up, I mean, so many different emotions, happiness, uh, a little bit of fear in terms of like, how am I going to do this? What type of approach am I going to have? You know, uh, the different things that I'm thinking about in terms of how I was raised, what I want to improve on, what things that I felt like actually went good, so that I can be effective as a father. So I didn't have my dad growing up, you know, so that was a thing for me as well too, in terms of thinking about how do you prepare for this thing where when you really didn't have this example of how to do it, you know. And I had my grandfather who was a great example, but he wasn't always at home. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference when you watching somebody all the time, but a lot of emotions, man. A lot of emotions.
Understandable.
What about you in terms of your first experience with your daughter?
Yeah. So I'll get into mine, but one more part to that question.
Oh,
that part B, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's some of the biggest things you've learned in that process when you were a new father? Like, what was one of the first big things you learned as far as fatherhood with your first child? Just one thing. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, but
yeah, that's a lot. But if we
just pick something.
if we want to just sum it down to one thing, or probably like the biggest thing that I learned, the things that are coming to mind is patience,
That's
and
big.
the constant development of that, and really, I think that's the thing that just kind of comes in my head. It's just the
Yeah.
thing that comes in my head is just like, a lot of people be like, I've heard the old saying like, hey, if you pray for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Know that God is possibly gonna test you to develop that thing, right? If I say I want to grow muscles, right, then I have to go through the test of pain by lifting weights or by doing calisthenics or by running or whatever it is that I'm trying to do to develop, the physique that I'm looking to have. But I got to go through the test, or I got to go through something in order to develop that skill, right? If I'm gonna be a speaker, then I got to speak to people, and consistently do that to hone on and sharpen those skills so that I can get more comfortable with doing so. So I think just patience and continuing to grow in that area is one of the things that I learned in terms of being a father, because I mean, there's times where I feel like I lost my patience. It's like, why is this kid crying or whatever? You in your
Effects.
in my 30 something at the time 32-year-old mind, I'm thinking like, I fed this kid, I've changed a diaper, you know.
Why the heck are you still crying? Exactly.
You just woke up, so you're not sleepy. Like, why are you crying? Like, what is, so you just thinking about those things. And but I think patience, man, is one of the things that I've consistently and is constantly still developing and growing in that area.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Patience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's big, man. That's now you were asking me my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I felt fear. I felt uncertainty. I felt closure.
Mm-hmm.
I felt love. And I felt awe, AWE, awe,
Mm-hmm.
in that entire process.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience, you all, my first daughter was born in 2017. It was a complete and utter shock to my system.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the hardest transitions I've ever made in my entire life. Because if you know me as a person, you know that I like peace. I don't like people to argue around me. I don't like all the yelling. I don't like all that And I ain't obviously, you know, I yell sometimes, but I ain't talking about myself. I'm talking about like other people around me. I don't want them to be yelling and stuff. I don't want chaos. I don't want all that stuff, man. I really like peace and harmony just in my environment. A baby is opposite of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they are operating on their own. My stuff is, I need my me time, my alone time. I need my peace, solitude, that silence sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I got my schedule going, and then here comes my daughter. And children are opposite of that, man. They are. I mean, especially babies. They can't talk.
Mm-hmm.
They just want what they want when they want it. So it was a complete shock to my system. One of the things I remember thinking was, I can't escape this. I thought to myself, if I if I want to leave my marriage, I divorce.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to leave my job, I quit.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to, you know, I enjoy playing video games, to use a kind of lesser example,
Right,
less
right.
extreme example. If I want to stop playing the game, I stop playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's no quitting on this child, right? Now, obviously, if I want to be a deadbeat, which I don't like at all, I don't like deadbeats,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's literally completely against my value system. So that obviously in my brain is not an option. So I'm not going to leave my child. Okay. So in my mind, there's no escaping this at all. There's like no way. I have to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
I must figure this out, or I just have to. There's no or nothing. I had to figure it out because my child's here. So I got to figure it out. Right. And I remember in that process, man, of learning how to be a father, I struggled so much with that chaos that was injected into my life, of just a normal child, her being her normal self. I was so thrown off, so I would get frustrated so easily, right? I remember this one time she was crying, and ironically enough, I'm using my Bible to demonstrate. She was crying. I had her like this because she was little at the time. I had her like this. She was crying, and I remember holding her. I had her like this. I wasn't even holding her properly. I had her like this. I told my wife, I said, take her. She's crying. I don't know what's going on. Just take her, huh? And I remember that time when I did that. She was crying. When I said that, I told my wife to take her because she's crying. I don't know why she's crying. What's going on? I was so frustrated. She stopped crying.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter stopped crying. I felt so bad about that situation. I felt so terrible as a father because as fathers, we have this power in our children's lives. We're a major, major voice in their ear, major voice. And at that time, I used my voice, my power, quote unquote, in anger, right? So she got quiet, not because not because I said, "Hey, be quiet, you're crying too much," because I was screaming and I was angry, and she stopped crying, right? Almost, I mean, I can't say it was fear. It was just, I think it was just being startled in general,
Mm-hmm.
right? She just stopped crying. That's not a good way for a child to be raised, right? At least in my opinion. Other people may differ in their opinion. That so that's just one example, man. I've had so many I made a lot of mistakes. Um, I've I've exploded more times than I can count. I mean, I couldn't. If I tried to count all the instances I've gone off on my child or my children, I would literally people you all would report me for, or not you all, but some of you might report me for emotional abuse. Like that's how many times I've gone there as a father, just like lost my temper with my children. I've never physically struck them to in anger, right? But I've yelled at them. Learning that, learning and developing that patience with my children, that was hard. It was tough to learn how to be especially first time father. My second child, I had a little bit of you know, I had a little bit of knowledge then. My
Mm-hmm.
first child, complete culture shock, shock to my system, really had to figure things out. So in that process, I made a lot of mistakes, as I just said, but I slowly started to learn. I'd make a mistake and I would say, oh, don't do this because A, is not going to be helpful for your child. And B, I would ask myself, why are you doing this? Why are you taking out your frustration on your children, your family? Why are you exploding at them? They didn't do anything but exist. They didn't do anything but exist. So why are you screaming at them? They have nothing to do with what you got going on. It was something completely different. You better go fuss at that. Right. And I said, Justin, why are you doing this? And I thought back really far, and I arrived at my 5-year-old self. I arrived at my 5-year-old self. And I realized that when I was 5, I remember that I cried. Very emotional child. I mean, children are emotional anyway, right? But I was very emotional. And I'm still sensitive to this day. I'm still emotionally sensitive now as a man, as an adult. But back then I was a child. So obviously, if I felt a certain type of way, I would express my emotions. And I remember one time something happened and I cried in front of my father. My father was, I was a little kid. I was 5. My father was 6'4". So he stood up and he yelled at me. He said, Justin, be quiet. And I remember that, right? And I remember that day, I didn't say it in these words, but this is the thought that I had. If I cry, if I show emotion, it's not good. Chaos will erupt, right? Something bad is going to happen. And I emotionally shut down, right? I mean, I would show emotion if something was really bad, but I wasn't very as expressive. I would also, because of that, and this will bring us current to why I was doing this with my children, because of that, I would not express myself on a consistent enough basis to get that emotion out. So I would take, not only would I explode, but I would take it out on people that had nothing to do with it or situations, right? So every mistake I made, I learned from it. And I still make mistakes, but I learned from every single one. And over time, after every mistake, I got a little better and a little better after that. And man, finally, I developed patience, right? Not that I don't get mad, not that I don't explode. I still do that sometimes. It's very rare, right? But I took the steps to develop as a father because I cannot let my children, I can't let them keep having the same curses that I went through. I can't yell at them, take stuff out on them when they express emotion or when they're being chaotic, which is just their normal selves. I can't do that to them just because it was done to me when I was a little kid. I have to break the cycle. I must make a change. And it starts with me, right? So this is all stuff I learned. I went to counseling. I've journaled. I mean, I do all kinds of stuff. I'm more expressive of my emotions when I'm feeling. All of these things played a part in me becoming a better father. So that now, as you know, now I'm 34, right? When I had my daughter, I was 29 or 28, turned 29 the next day. Now I've gone to another level as a dad. Again, not perfect, but I now have the patience. I now have many more tools that I can use, not only for myself, but for my children, so that my ceiling, the stuff I learned as an adult or fixed as an adult, and I still have stuff I'm working on. I'm not perfect, not completely fixed or healed from everything. I'm not even trying to portray that, but my ceiling can now be their floor, right? So that's one of the biggest things I learned. Just work on yourself or work on myself. I learned to be more emotionally expressive as needed, and I learned to use my tools that I learned over time, and that's helped me in my fatherhood journey. It was a shock to my system, but I've been able to adjust accordingly. And now I can sit here and honestly say, I'm the best. God sent my children here to me for a reason. There's a reason I'm their caregiver. He doesn't send children to us. He sends children, and this isn't a spirituality or religion conversation. We have another episode for that. But I truly believe he sits up there and sends children sends the souls into children's bodies, and he sends them to the exact set of parents that they need. I don't care if that's an adoptive set of parents or biological. He sends them to the ones that they're supposed to go to, because stuff that happens with your children, stuff that happens, whether it's, epigenetically, which is just like personality and stuff passed down through genetics, or whether it's just their environment, stuff that happens, sometimes only you as their dad can understand, because it comes from you, right? So I think he sends children to families on purpose, to specific people, like, because there's stuff that they have to either work on in themselves, or that only they're able to address within that child, right? And I think that's the case for any parents, especially biological parents, right? Because it's literally your blood line in the child. So they're like, a lot of stuff you see, you're like, I don't like it, but it comes from me, because I used to do that. I still do that sometimes, but I know how to address this. Let me go ahead and address this, because me as a 34-year-old, I've already been through that, and I know where it leads. Let me go ahead and tell my, 5-year-old child, my 3-year-old son, hey, such and such, and this is what happened if you keep doing this. Or at that age, there you just tell them, not to do it or whatever have you. So anyway, I say all that to say that was my experience. Complete shock to my system, and I had to learn a lot. So as a parent, so Myron, back to you, man. As a parent, what kind of approach do you take? Like, you see these shows. I don't know if you've ever seen the show. They have like a parenting show now where they, I forget the name of it, where they exchange. I think it's parents. Like, different parents go. They have like 10 groups of parents with 10 different parenting approaches. They have like helicopter parents, achievement driven, stuff like that, and they take those parents, and I think they switch households, so that helicopter parents are taking care of achievement oriented kids, and so on and so forth. Like, free thinker is another one, gentle parenting, right? So what's your personal approach to taking care of your children, if you had to pick one? What would you say your approach is?
I think I'm not familiar with a bunch of the different terms in terms like the descriptive terms of them. But I would definitely say that we're probably more towards the gentle parenting approach in terms of things. And I think for me, it's more so of, when I was a kid, I kind of would say that, my mom was a no nonsense type of person, you know, she was merciful, I would say, if there's a good term. She was merciful, but I think one of the things particularly for her that was interesting. Oh, okay. Authoritative, permissive, neglectful. Okay.
These are just 4, like, I guess, major parenting styles that are out there. So go on, keep talking. You're talking about your mom. Yep. I want to put this up here just to assist with some verbiage.
I think in terms of, my mom was more, as I'm looking at these, it looks like more, she was more of an authoritarian.
Gotcha.
So not authoritative, but more authoritarian. So
got it.
Parent driven, she set the rules. One way communication with, there were some, I mean, she was definitely considered, I think she was more hybrid with some things.
Yeah.
But I think when you think about my childhood, my mom I was her first child too, So, and she had me at 18, in the South, where, people could probably potentially be judgmental about, based upon, like, a person's experiences and different things like this. So I think she was learning a lot
Mm-hmm.
job, you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? While still trying to figure out a lot of different things.
Uh-huh.
Plus, you know, when I had my first child, I had a master's degree at that point.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I was 30 something, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, I mean, a large gap. We're talking about a 12, almost a 12 plus year gap in terms of like when I had my first child versus when she had her first. So I think she was doing a lot of learning, but still having to kind of make a whole lot of sacrifice.
Yeah, that plays a part in it. That's a good point.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
age, what age do you have the child? How established are you in yourself and your life, you know?
Right. We were still staying with my grandparents, when she first had me.
Yeah.
I was still staying with my grandparents at the time. Like, I mean, that's just crazy, just in terms of the processing and just kind of thinking about it overall in terms of everything. But I think I take more of the approach of, I think I was still learning too, but I think I try to take more of that passive type, not really passive, but more so of the gentle parenting where I'm not really trying to, spank my kids for every different situation and
Mm-hmm.
circumstance. And more power to those people who
Well,
do.
don't say you spank your kids, you're going to jail, bro.
uh,
I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
but like, um, it's not to say that I haven't, but
Yeah.
I think in terms of Ashton, in terms of her age, but like I
And
just it
and you
hadn't.
mentioned Ashton. Sorry to interrupt. One more thing. You
Oh yeah,
mentioned the name again. You said Ashton.
yeah.
For the listeners, Ashton is
My
your
first. Mhm.
firstborn daughter. Okay, cool.
So you know, for hers particularly, I, just a lot of learning in terms of how to be effective in terms of that specific methodology.
Yep.
Um, that requires you having structure. That requires making sure that the environment is conducive for her to make effective decisions.
Yep.
If I'm like, hey, don't touch this pen, but the pen is still in her vicinity,
Right. She's gonna want to touch it.
gonna want to touch it. She want to be impulsive in terms of like touching it. So like, and I think we're doing our child a disservice as parents to be like, hey, don't touch that. And I get
That's
that in
big.
certain
That's
situations.
big. Yeah. Good point. Good point.
I think that that's okay to say like, hey, don't touch that. But I think at the same time, like I need to create an environment.
Create an environment. That's
Those
big.
decisions are harder to make.
There you go. I love it. That is. We could turn the pod off. Man. Just my luck. Episode 2. We out. Like that was big. All right. But yeah. But keep on going. Let this man cook. Let's go. Go ahead.
But I mean, that's kind of more so the approach I take. I mean, so there's some days that I feel like I got it really in the bag, and then there's some days I'm like, man, what the hell is going on? You
Yeah.
know,
That's facts. That's how
when
it is.
this ain't working, and I'd be thinking about how my mom did things. I'm like, yeah, man, I gotta go back to the
Yeah,
old
she's go
school.
back to the
I
the
gotta go back to
authoritarian.
you go back to what you know and what you feel like works. And I think, like you said, going back to, your experience with your father in terms of stuff like that, like we always got to keep in mind and factor in those things in terms of how we were raised does play a part into how we go into maybe our
Parenting.
philosophical approach in terms of
Yeah,
how we parent.
that's true.
Even if you don't believe or really agree with the way that you were raised,
Right. It still can show up
yeah, it's still
in your
yeah,
parenting.
it's still a show up, man. You're like, you know,
You have to be
um,
very careful and
yeah,
kind of watch. You have to
yeah,
kind of watch
mm-hmm,
what you're doing because you're like, okay, why am I doing this?
mm-hmm,
This is
mm-hmm,
how I was done, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to go.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like if you're not careful, like you'll end up, doing some of the things that you may have not, necessarily agreed with or felt like were um, quote unquote the best method, to do it. And I mean, who's to say anything is, quote unquote wrong? There's best practices and everything, but you know, I think this is the thing that I came to grips with in terms of my upbringing with different things. And I think people also have to come to this same conclusion with a lot of things. I hear a lot of people in different, and I feel like I'm getting off topic to a degree, but I think like the biggest thing that I was able to do in terms of like when I was talking with my mom and when we were kind of processing through some of my experiences and stuff like that, the biggest thing for me in terms of being able to forgive my mom for errors or different things like that was just understanding that like that she was giving the absolute best that she could,
Yeah, and by the way, this is not off topic. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
about parenting,
Mm-hmm.
right? We didn't say we didn't say it was all about us parenting our children. We can
Mm-hmm.
talk about our parents too. So as we've been doing. So yeah, keep on going. It's not off topic.
So, I think that when I think about that, that's one of the things that I had to get to in terms of with my with my uh with my mom. And just it's like, hey, just being able to forgive, but then also understanding like sometimes I was a knucklehead, you know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Talk too much.
Of
you
course.
know, I was laughing about me I was talking about because in the school system I went to I was in Charleston, Mississippi, so like in Charleston elementary school or whatever, throughout my time in Charleston educational system, um, I remember getting a citizenship award one time. And citizenship award is based upon your behavior. So like you're having to get like S's or whatever consistently
Uh-huh.
your behavior,
Yeah,
right?
my daughter gets those now. Those little
Bro,
S's and G's and stuff.
bro, no, I think it would be and you'd have to get like perfect. It couldn't be like no C's or any, like
Yeah.
I think S was satisfactory, C was something or whatever, like
Y'all
uh
have the E's like for excellent.
yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember what the rubric was in terms of like what they were basing it on or what each letter meant. But
Yeah.
one citizenship award the whole time, and
Gotcha.
it was because I talked too much. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Or quote unquote based upon what people's in terms of what they feel like we should do based upon conversations and stuff. Um, you just have to look at it from both sides. Like I know that there was things that I could have done better when she said don't do something and then you do it anyway, you know. Or there's things that, you know, where like maybe she could have handled the situation a little bit better and I think that's the thing for me is just the biggest thing for me is just being able to honestly sit back and forgive and say like, I appreciate you doing the best that you could.
For sure. For sure. It's good. It's good, man. That's awesome. Um, for mine, then we'll you know, just my luck. We kind
Mm-hmm.
of wrap it up
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for today. But
Okay.
man, for me, my mom, my dad, I had both my parents in the home until I was about 11. And I didn't realize, I knew they divorced, but I didn't remember exactly when
Mm-hmm.
until we found the divorce papers about a year, yeah, about a year ago. We found them in some papers that my mom gave me from that my dad had, some of
Mm-hmm.
his stuff, right? So going through the papers, found divorce papers. So I found out I had both my parents in the house till 11. I know that because I saw the papers. And so my parents were definitely a melting pot. If we look at those four parenting styles, permissive, authoritative, neglectful, authoritarian, there were little traits of all of them. There were some traits of permissive parenting sometimes, right? My mom would, for example, if we asked for something from the store, sometimes she'd say, don't ask me for nothing. Sometimes she would give us whatever we wanted, right? There's traits of authoritative, open communication, right? She did that sometimes. Set clear rules and expectations. Sometimes there was traits of neglectful. I didn't get I literally didn't get, there were times I'd go to school, didn't have my hair brushed. I'm talking about for years. I would go to school, didn't have my hair brushed. No one set me down, not even my father. And I had a great dad. I love my dad, miss him dearly. He didn't show me how to do that. And I'm not even blaming him. Kind of like what Myron said. They did the best they could at the time. He probably busy with other stuff, working, stresses of life. But he didn't show me how to brush my hair, right? So I'll go to school nappy. I didn't know. I was a kid, right? I didn't know till like 7th, 8th grade, to consistently go get a haircut. I probably had a few haircuts in my life up to that point. It's crazy to think on now, right? Because I always, as a result, make sure my son's hair is brushed. So make sure that I take him to get haircuts.
You had like a high top fade, or
bro? I promise you, it wasn't even a high top. It was just all over the place.
Just all over the place, yeah.
Man, I'm talking about a little deep. I mean, it was crazy. Anyway, then there's authoritarian. Sometimes it's like, this is my way, or I get yelled at, right? Or we got yelled at, right? So there's a melting pot of approaches. One of the things that is big, though, that I will acknowledge is, like Myron said, my parents were doing the best they could. While I have yet to sit down and fully process with my mother my childhood with her, because there were things that happened that I never told my mom about. To this day, I've never told her about, right? Because I didn't feel safe to share those things emotionally. I felt safe physically in my home. I was never abused or anything like that physically, but I didn't feel emotionally safe to share those things, right? Same thing with my dad. My dad was everything's fine, kind of nonchalant. We're good. Everything's cool, but it wasn't good. Stuff would not be good, right? So I never felt like, okay, I can tell them this, right? So I haven't really processed that with my mom, but I have forgiven her for things that I was mad about for years. And I do recognize that she was doing the best she could, right? But I still want to sit down and process with her. And she actually wants to do that as well with all of us. So that's going to be a very interesting just talk. May end up having to go to like a family counselor, but that's going to be tough because I grew up with 4 younger brothers in the house. There's 5 of us, getting us all together. Plus my mom, that's going to be tough now. But yeah, that's something that she desires. And then my dad, he was there. And even after they divorced, we could go see our dad. It wasn't like he was missing and gone. He would come around, he'd come to events, everything. But when it came to being more of a hands-on parent, like, look, my boys, let me take them, let me just talk to them about life. We didn't listen. All this stuff that you learn that people say, oh, I'm supposed to learn from my dad, like whether your dad wasn't there or like my situation, my dad just didn't tell me this kind of stuff, right? Like, how do you navigate the social aspects of school? What if I'm getting bullied? What should I do? No one ever. All people told me was, if you get hit, fight. You fight. You can fight. That's all. There's more to it than that.
Right.
There's a power dynamic, right? To get a bully to stop messing with you, there's a little side note. First of all, you need to, let me tell y'all, this is a side note. This is off topic. This is off topic because I was bullied, so I want people to understand, especially if you're a father and you want to tell your children, right? People say, go tell the teacher. Sure, that's a possible option. I'm not saying don't do that. Here's what I tell my kids. There's a power dynamic here. This bully, whoever it is, they think they are more powerful than you. They may be bigger. They may, for whatever reason, they think that, right? And they may be physically bigger, so they're bullying you, right? First thing they're going to do is start talking about you. They're making comments.
Mm-hmm.
I said, right then and there, you have my permission to comment back. I don't care what you say.
Mm-hmm.
You could talk about anything, everything's fair game. I don't care. Why? Because that is first stage. That's just psychological banter back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to like say something back, that's fine. Okay, please, you weak too. What you talking about? That's fine. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You said it to the bully.
Mm-hmm.
If you end up fighting, right, because it may come to blows, and you're able to win, you find yourself having the upper hand. If you're getting beat down, okay, you're getting beat down. I still respect it because you tried to fight, right? But if you get the upper hand, I want you to decimate him or her.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to go above and beyond what you think you need to do. Like, I don't care what it is. And the reason I say do that is because if you do that, not only will that stop that bully from happening, other people are going to see that. This is how this is the hidden curriculum of school. Mm-hmm. This is the stuff behind the stuff you go to school and learn. This ain't math. This is the hidden curriculum. This is social background stuff. Mm-hmm. People are watching that. They are going to see that. And they're going to think to themselves, I ain't about to mess with this girl. Right? So that'll stop future bullying if people were even considering that. Right? No one told me that. I wish somebody would have just told me even some of that stuff as a kid. I learned till 30. So my parenting, my parents, love them. Again, they were great. They did so many good things. They gave me so many great qualities that people enjoy today. Mm-hmm. Right? When it comes to my parenting style, our parenting style, again, it's a mix of all of them. I've been neglectful of my children before, of their emotional needs. Mm-hmm. I've been permissive. Like if I'm doing something, I'll be permissive sometimes today. When I'm busy doing something, my child come ask me, can I do something? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Because I'm doing something else. Mm-hmm. Right? Authoritative, right? I do that. Open communication. Definitely more of that now with my child than it was given to me. And then authoritarian, I do that sometimes too. Like, go do this, period. And then my children try to talk to me, reason, no, go do this. So I think all of them are needed at certain points, minus the neglectful. I don't think that's necessarily needed at any. Actually, I take that back. It says provides a little nurturance or guidance. I think that is needed sometimes in certain situations. I think that if we go and show our children everything that they're supposed to do to solve every problem, I think that can become a hindrance.
It can become crippling.
It can become crippling, a crutch to them, right? To them, when they're older, they're not going to know how to do anything for themselves, right? So sometimes you have to let them go with a little guidance or give them a little bit and then go do it. Make mistakes, that's fine. Come back after you made some mistakes. If you're still struggling with it, need help, I can give you a little tip to help you, right?
Wow.
So
that's so good because like I just think about myself and I think about some of the skills. My mom wasn't necessarily neglectful, but I think it was more so of like the other thing where it's like or so authoritative to the point to where so much of an authoritarian to where
making all the decisions about everything.
Yeah, so where you don't get to make any decisions or you get to make some, but like I didn't have some of the soft skills that I felt like I needed to be a like man, right? So like,
of course.
My mom would
same.
My mom is super disciplined. Like she every day, same time, go work. She would be up, cook breakfast, went and ran her bus route because she was working at the same high school that I was, ran the bus route, passed me on her route that she was on,
Yeah.
and and be at work in her desk chair before I even got up. And then I get to the place and I'm like late, and she's like, "Boy, nah, I'm not taking you." So
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, just super disciplined, but her parents were super disciplined.
Of
Like,
course.
so I'm wondering, like, why ain't I, why wasn't that a thing for me? But it wasn't something she necessarily harped on. But I wish it was something that she harped on a little bit more, and so that I could have had some of those skills in terms of like, all right, bro, like I think she did much better with my sister in
Yeah, of
terms of
course. Yeah, you
discipline.
learn from the first one. You get,
So like it hurt me in areas where like when I probably in terms of like being ready for like academic rigor when I went to college, I wasn't ready, man. I wasn't ready to I gotta go to class and different things like that. And
right.
um, uh, I mean I did, but I still struggle with it. I was consistently late. My professors would get on to me like, bro, show up on time. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
my percussion instructor, he would get on to me like, show up on time. You know what I'm saying?
Seriously.
It was just a big thing for me in terms of just like time management. Like, bro, I didn't even have a calendar, like like a actual like planner. I didn't have a
Really?
yeah.
How are you like managing your time?
I didn't have a planner throughout most of my college career.
That's crazy. It sounds crazy to me. I mean,
It
like, that's crazy. I didn't know you.
like no, like it wasn't until probably around the time that I met y'all where I started doing one. It's probably not at the level that I've gotten to now, or not to the level, uh, not to an efficient level at that time. But dude, I would just take the syllabuses for the courses and stuff like that, and that would be
That's like your planner, quote unquote.
yeah, that was essentially what my planner
Yeah.
was, or um, you know, most of the dates and times or different things were always consistent. So if something added, I just write it on the syllabus or something like this so I can remember that date and time. Like if Dr. Baker, well, I keep saying names and stuff like that. That was my percussion instructor at the time. But if my percussion instructor said like, hey, show up at this time, I would write that time down, or I may put it in my phone or like, or something like that to remind myself to go to that thing. But in terms of like an actual planner and stuff like that, I didn't use that, you know.
Yeah. That 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 when I think about that, like living a lifestyle like that, it
Mm-hmm.
feels very reactive to me. It feels like, oh man, I gotta be here. It's like you have some plans for the day, then you look at your paper, you're like, oh, I gotta be at this place at 3.
Exactly.
And then you
That's
react, get ready, and then go. Like it
yes.
feels very reactive as opposed to
Yes.
proactive,
Yeah.
which, if you use a planner or whatever, some kind of basic time management tool, you're able to kind of schedule stuff a little better, which you say you do more of now. Well, I clearly can see you do it more now because we talk all the time and you're very regimented. But as you said, that's developed over
Dude,
time.
and
That,
it's still a skill that I struggle with, you know what I'm
oh
saying?
yeah. I mean,
It's
quiet
still
quiet
it,
is kept. We're wired, man. We're
mm-hmm.
we're wired how we are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Can we improve
Mm-hmm.
and can we be neuroplastic and change or rewire ourselves? Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But if it wasn't wired in us when we were a child,
Mm-hmm.
we're still going to be learning probably our entire rest of our lives how
Right.
to get even better at that thing that we're trying to pick up. There's a quote that Dr. Eric Thomas says, for
Mm-hmm.
anyone who listens to him. Me and Myron are we're both fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, you know, there are two worlds, right? In everything, there's two worlds. If you look at stuff, everything is it's two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what it is. Like you mentioned, discipline. There's discipline, then there's undisciplined, right? Or I guess, more free form, so to speak, reactive or proactive. We kind of think of it that way. There's, healthy, unhealthy, healthy lifestyle, unhealthy lifestyle, white collar, blue collar. There's these dichotomies in everything. There's two sides. He says, and here's the quote. This was crazy when I first heard this because it changed my life. And he said it kind of as a side note. I was like, no, rewind that. That's the game changer for me. That particular quote. He said, one side of everything you're going to grow up with. You're going to be born with it, into it, or grow up with it, period. The other side, you're going to have to take. You're going to have to take the other side. You're going to have to go out and learn for yourself the other side of things. Yeah. So, yes, we have certain skills that we were taught, right? Whatever those might be, whether it's you, Myron, or me. There are certain things we taught as a child and we grew up that were beneficial to us, right? On the flip side, there are things that were taught to us and that are wired in us that aren't necessarily the best for us, results-wise. But we have to take the other side. We have to, if we decide to do something, like for example, me. I grew up interacting with and being friends with a lot of white people, right? I barely ever went to all black stuff, right? I talked to black people. I mean, that wasn't a problem.
That is another topic, dog, because in terms
of but seriously, all black stuff, like besides family events, which isn't a very good microcosm of all black, because my family is all very, I guess, we're all black, but we're very. I'm just trying to describe, I guess,
different
proper,
type of black,
educated. Yeah, I don't know what the proper educated, not the black people that I'm talking about. I'm talking about us black folks, just black folks, right? That I talk to, have conversations with, stuff like that. Man, I didn't grow up around that. When I got to Memphis and started working at the recording studio I used to work at in Memphis, them black folks, I used to be so judgmental. I used to say some of the craziest stuff. I'm telling you all, like I used to say some of the stupidest stuff ever because I wasn't around enough of my own people. And the black people I was around, like in college, stuff like that, this is college black people. These are black people that we play video games, stuff like that. Nerds, as some people would say. I wasn't around like the rest of the black folks, I'll say. When I started working there, guy pulled me to the side. He said, "You better stop that stupid stuff. You better stop it." No, he said, for real, you're being judgmental. You need to stop. You talking all professional. Yeah, you proper. You can talk. You have phone skills. That's all great for certain stuff. That ain't gonna work here for what you're doing. Changed my life. Really opened my eyes because I was like, yeah, I have been judgmental, and it changed my life. And now, over the years, obviously, I had to learn how to interact with my own people, right? The other black people. I'm gonna say that, right?
It's crazy.
I had to learn. So, yeah, and that's a whole other topic. I know.
Yeah, it's crazy that you say that, and I'm
white people is fine. Like white people, I'm like, oh, let's go. I'm used to sitting around them, but
yeah, like even when it comes to like leadership, I think about my job. I know we're talking about parenting and this kind of, but like even with my job in leadership, one of my coworkers that I work with just moved on to a different position now. She made a comment of like, about how I operate with my staff or whatever. And I told us like, well, you realize you got 4 black females and 1 white male who's cultured to African American culture.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was like, you realize that, right? I got, at the time I had 3 white females.
Yep. You had to approach those groups differently.
There's like, if I'm coaching like a basketball team or something like that, and all of those guys are, like whatever the situation may be, there's different type of ways that I can talk to them.
Right, exactly. It's different. Can be exactly. You can't use one approach with everybody.
HR is gonna be on my neck in like 2 or 3 minutes or something like that. Like there's different ways that like it just ain't happening. And I was like, I can't do that. And she's like, you know what? You're right.
Yeah. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So, but yeah, man, that's a whole nother podcast right there.
Right.
We can talk for hours about that. I mean, yeah. But yeah, so that's just an example. You born with one side, the other side you must take. And so with that, man, Just My Luck, episode 2. Man, y'all can reach out to us. For now, when this is posted, we'll have an email address on this. When we post these, there'll be an email address in the description or the show notes. So you all be able to email us with any questions, suggestions, things like that. Man, and with that, I'm Justin.
And I'm Myron.
It's been Just My Luck. Y'all have a great one. Peace.
Peace out.